Welcome everyone to the 2023 State of Marketing AI webinar. We are here with Marketing AI Institute in the form of Paul and myself, and then Drift in the form of CEO Scott Ernst, who we're very lucky to have here. So with Scott is Paul Roetzer, founder and CEO of Marketing AI Institute. Myself, Mike Kaput, I'm the Chief Content Officer at Marketing AI Institute. And we will have coming on for our Q&A portion, Emily Singer, who is the Senior Director of Corporate and Customer Marketing at Drift. So we've got a really awesome packed agenda today. We are going to talk about a lot of things related to our brand new launching today 2023 State of Marketing AI report. We're going to get into all the details of what that is and what's included, but very briefly, we're going to talk about what the State of Marketing AI report actually is, what it means, why we're doing it. Is the third annual one in partnership with Drift. So we're going to talk about how both our organizations have been looking at AI, especially in this really, really exciting year-long period we've had since, mid 2022 with the explosion of generative AI, ChatGPT, and overall AI acceleration. After that, we're going to talk quickly through the methodology and respondents for the report. So give you a sense of actually where all the data we're going to share comes from. We're then going to do a deep dive into the key findings. Myself and Paul will kind of discuss what those mean, what we're seeing in the market, what the data is telling us, and what you can learn from it. And last but certainly not least, we're going to do in-depth Q&A between Marketing AI Institute and Emily at Drift. And we'll be taking everyone's questions as we go. I will also note we'll provide a link towards the end of this presentation to go get the report today. You also will receive an ungated version of it via email after this presentation. I believe we are set to have that go out tomorrow morning. So there will be multiple ways to get the report, and you'll be able to check out all this awesome data for yourself. So I'm going to turn it quickly over to Paul and Scott to give us kind of a sense of what the State of Marketing AI report is and why we're talking about this today.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So this is an initiative we started years ago, and Drift has been an amazing partner for us ever since. And the idea back then, the 3 years ago was, what is the awareness? What is the understanding of AI? What does adoption look like? And how is it evolving from year to year? And when we first did it together in 2021, I think we had 400 responses. Then we hit 600 responses. This year, over 900 responses. And I think it's fair to say the world of AI just changed in late 2022 with the emergence of generative AI as like a field of study and an area where applications were exploding. So Scott, welcome, and thank you for our partnership through these years with this research report.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, and thanks for having us. We're proud of the fact that this is our third year sponsoring this, important work in this important partnership together. And it's incumbent upon us to get this information into the market, into the hands of marketers, and really can't imagine a more opportune time to make that happen, right? So there's, at this point, I think, now versus 3 years ago, there's no shortage of content out there about the state of AI. And we've been talking together about how AI will transform go-to-market motions and the impact that has on customer experiences way before it was cool, right? And you've talked a lot on the podcast about you need to be in it to win it. So we certainly feel like that at Drift. Like, we've been a pioneer in AI for over 5 years, and we've been working with you again before this idea was as cool and novel as it is. So we're not new to AI. Again, we've been innovating with AI and our customers over the last 5 years. We've got 13 patents, lots of customers, lots of real experience, again, on how to use this technology to make better, more human experiences, which give us this, credibility and confidence that we have now, as the market is emerging. So, all that's going on, we're in AI, and then bam, right? GPT hits and changes everything, right? Like nothing any of us have ever seen before. I'm, old enough to have had the perspective of being around kind of a couple different revolutions, the early days of internet, the smartphone revolution, and we think about this as the intelligence revolution now. And again, it's exciting, a little harrowing, but an amazing place to be. And I think just as Microsoft and Apple led the consumerization of IT, GPT and OpenAI have now made AI approachable, consumable for the masses, and really made AI conversational and more human-like. And we believe at Drift, when done right, AI can make the B2B buying experience more human. And that's what we set off to do every day.
Awesome. Well, again, Scott, we really appreciate the support. And again, the vision going back years to help in the awareness and education aspect of this. And I think that's been the real key, is looking for partners who are willing to see the vision and share a vision for what could happen in marketing if AI became infused into everything we do. And as we're going to learn today, as Mike starts taking us into the key findings, we're starting to see that trend really, really happen. So Scott, thank you again for being with us today. We really appreciate you and Drift.
Yeah, love it. Like, none of us succeed without great partners. And we think of the Marketing AI Institute as a great partner for Drift, and can't be more enthusiastic to continue to participate. So thank you all.
All right. Thanks, Scott. All right, Mike, let's do it. Let's get into the key findings from this year's report and how we did it.
All right. Sounds good. Before we dive into all this great data, we want to share how we actually got the data. We think it's really important to be kind of transparent about different data collection methods and what goes into all these surveys you see out there. Paul, you and I have kind of griped a few times about, in the marketing industry, sometimes people poll 12 people and say it's a survey. And so we really try to be pretty rigorous about what we're doing when we're surveying people and how we're going about doing that. So I want to dive a little bit into the methodology and the respondents, and then we'll get into the good stuff. But first off, it's important to know we put this survey out in the field from about April 26th to July 12th, 2023. So it's about a 2.5 month period where the survey was live. And as part of the survey, we asked 17 different questions on artificial intelligence and its role in marketing. That could be everything from how people are using it, how they're understanding it, barriers to adoption, and much, much more. Now, many of those questions are carried over from our 2021 or 2022 reports, so we can start benchmarking data year over year, though there are several new ones given how much has changed in the last 12 months or so. We also asked 6 questions about various just basic demographics. So what are people's roles? What size company are they at? Things like that. What area of marketing are they in? Just to understand better who was actually responding to these questions. Now, as part of the survey, you did not have to complete the whole thing in order to have your responses counted. So 918 people completed at least part of the survey, though functionally we had such a high full completion rate, you're basically looking at most of the respondents for each of the questions. 96% of people completed the full survey. There are very few questions that don't have over 900 responses as we go through them. And last but not least, we think it's important to note that we promoted the survey largely through Marketing AI Institute's audience. Now, everyone has their own type of unique audience with their own unique characteristics. So you just have to understand that the responses we're about to see are not like a perfect sample of every single marketer on the planet. They comprise the Institute's audience. So there may be people that are more ahead of the game on AI represented, given that we've been doing this since 2016. We may have people who've been following AI since way back when in marketing. There may just be overrepresentations of different groups as well. So I'll get into those respondents in a second here, but just kind of understand, it is largely the Marketing AI Institute audience that we're hearing from in this data.
And I would just add real quick, I think this is really important for everybody, as Mike was saying, with research. Like, there's all these reports out there that claim they know what's going on in AI or how much money is going to be spent or how many jobs are being impacted. And you really do have to always dig into the methodology and who exactly is answering these questions. And so, in our case, we just want to be straight up with that bias around there's 11 million marketers in the world. We have about 50,000 subscribers at the Institute, people who are in the newsletter, downloaded contacts, people who have given us their contact information over the last few years. So it's a pretty strong sample overall, but those are people who are actively seeking AI information. They have subscribed to an AI institute. So the basic takeaway here is there's a decent chance that you are interacting with people who are less advanced than the sample we're looking at, because they're people who showed an inclination to already have an interest in AI. So that's kind of the gist of it. But we think it's a very strong sample, and probably based on what we've seen, very representative of where we are. And we'll kind of add context as we're going to each of the key findings.
Absolutely. And I'm going to make one more note here that came up in the chat. Yes, these are all unique responses. These are not double counted people or anything like that. All right. So let's take a quick look at who these people are. One note here, you're going to see percentages throughout this presentation. There's two things that are important to note about percentages here. The first is, in any given table you see in a screenshot, there's a very good chance that the percentages won't exactly add up to 100%. So we are aware of that. That's basically to simplify the reading of the report. We may go 1% or 2% in either direction because of rounding up from decimal points. So if you see a table that doesn't add up to 100%, the data itself does. It is just simplified for consumption of the audience. Also, you will see tables that have things like you see in the bottom of this screenshot where there's 83%, 68%. They add up to well over 100. There are plenty of questions where people could select multiple answers. So we'll try to call those out, but that's why you're going to see certain percentages that add up to hundreds and hundreds of percent. So in terms of our respondents, first, we asked about roles, and we found that about 61% of the respondents identify their role as director level or above. So a pretty decently senior audience here. We also found that about 36% of all respondents are actually in the C-suite. So very high level audience that is answering these questions. Chief marketing officers comprised about 9% of that total audience. When we asked about what areas of marketing people are involved in, content marketing was the most popular. People could pick multiple areas. So this doesn't mean 83% of people are content marketers or have a content marketing title. It simply means 83% are involved in some way in content. Other really popular areas that people are involved in include email, social, advertising, and analytics. In terms of industry, about 27% work in professional services. Other popular industries include software, media, education, and healthcare. We also wanted to know, do they consider themselves B2B, B2C, or both? 88% overall work in B2B. Now that can be exclusively in B2B or someone who answered both. When we look at who answered either exclusively B2C or in both B2C and B2B, that's about 45% of marketers. 57% of all the respondents work at companies with $10 million or less in revenue. So that's pretty standard across the years as we've done this report. We actually had 68% at 10 million or less in 2022. So we definitely have gotten much bigger companies in this audience as a proportion of respondents over time, but definitely pretty in line with the majority of them being in this 10 million or less range. However, when you look at 50 million or more in revenue as a segment, all the way up to $1 billion plus, about a little more than a fourth of respondents come from that segment. So we do have a good segment of very large companies answering questions. When it comes to employees, this is pretty much in line with revenue. 53% work at companies with less than 50 employees, and about 27% work at companies with 250 or more employees. So now that we kind of understand who has been answering these questions, let's kind of dive in and look at some of the key findings that we've extracted from all this data. So here I'm going to kind of tee up some of the findings here. Paul and I are going to maybe discuss some of the things that jump out and really go through kind of piece by piece the narrative that we saw coming out of this data. First up, it is abundantly obvious that AI is a clear priority for marketers this year. The question we asked here was, how important is AI to the success of your marketing in the next 12 months? That's important, not just in general, but in the next 12 months. And actually 64% of marketers said that AI is either very important or critically important to their marketing success over the next 12 months. And it should be noted, this is a huge change over 2022. So 64% this year, only 51% said the same thing last year. So in terms of a 13 basis point bump or percentage point bump is pretty significant over a single year, and likely due to many of the factors that Paul and Scott were discussing. This year, people also actually said that AI was more critically important in 2023 than they did last year by a significant margin. So Paul, I mean, I think this really just jumped out to us as a headline of the report the moment we saw this finding come in.
Yeah, this is one of the questions I was waiting to see the response on, because it is one we've asked year over year. And I thought that we would see a major uptick here, and we definitely did. And so it did, just one of those findings, you expect this to happen. And it kind of confirmed what we've been seeing in the market, certainly what we've been seeing at the Institute with everything in terms of the interest and the conversations we're having. There does seem to be a much greater sense of urgency to infuse AI into marketing, and this definitely validated that.
When we started looking at, okay, marketers are prioritizing artificial intelligence, but what are they looking to actually do with it? It turns out they're primarily looking to use AI to save time. So we actually asked respondents which outcomes their organizations were interested in achieving with artificial intelligence. Now, they could choose a range of options here, but saving time was far and away the top outcome. 77% of all respondents said that reducing the time spent on repetitive tasks is what they're looking to achieve with AI. Now, we also drilled down into what are the top outcomes specifically that people who identified as decision makers or in the C-suite were looking to achieve, just to see if that lined up with what we were hearing from the general respondents. And it turns out decision makers and the C-suite are also highly motivated to see reducing time as the top outcome they want to achieve with AI. Far and away, it was their top outcome as well.
Yeah, and I think for this one, this is what we see all the time. It's the most natural thing. It's how we teach it, like the use case model. Look at the things you're already doing, find ways to do it more efficiently. It's the fastest path to value creation in AI. But I think what we're going to start to see, and we've seen it in the data moving year to year, is the leading companies, the ones who really become disruptors in their industry, are going to look at ways for AI to enhance creativity, decision-making, innovation. They're going to look more at the acceleration of revenue side of this. And so it's still like 60% is not bad on the accelerate revenue. But I do think that you're going to continue to see that the time saving, cost saving at the top. It's probably going to stay that way for a while. But again, the innovative companies are going to find ways to identify new markets, find new customers, increase customer conversion rates, and reduce churn. Like, they're going to find ways to have this impact the revenue side. And so for you, on the call, I would challenge you, starting with use cases specific to time saving, nothing wrong with that at all. It's the best way to do it. It's the fastest way to do it. But as you move into planning for 2024, really think strategically about how you can use it to solve problems and achieve goals better.
So what's really interesting too is not only are marketers kind of prioritizing AI, but they just expect a widespread effect on their work in the near future when it comes to AI automation. So to understand this change over time of how much marketers expect AI to be automating their work, we asked a couple of different questions. First, we asked what percentage of marketing tasks that your team performs are intelligently automated to some degree today. And by intelligently automated, we mean AI is being used to improve the efficiency or performance of the task. We then asked the same people in another question, what percentage of tasks are going to be intelligently automated, do you anticipate, in the next 5 years? So what we're trying to do is see what is the reality today, how much AI is being used, And where do these marketers expect that to go in the future? Now, this is pretty interesting, the fact that 78% of respondents think they will be using AI to intelligently automate more than a quarter of their work in the next 5 years. So that's roughly in line with where they thought things were going in 2022, but it was about 74% thought the same thing. But I do want to note that today, just 15% of marketers say that more than a quarter of their marketing tasks are intelligently automated. So that's quite the delta where we say there's going to be a huge amount of tasks in the next 5 years that people anticipate will be significantly automated by AI. And in fact, 38% of people, all told, said that they think it'll be half to 75% of their tasks that will be intelligently automated with AI in 5 years, which I found pretty jaw-dropping.
I think this chart's going to keep pushing further and further to the 50 to 75% or more number, because the reality is we're under the assumption 80%, like at least 80% of what you do is going to be AI assisted to some degree in the next 1 to 2 years. So I think that the market and respondents are actually underestimating how quickly this is going to happen and how significant the change is going to be.
So not all of this is kind of aspirational or what people expect to happen. I mean, people are already significantly adopting AI in marketing. We asked, how would you best describe your personal use of AI tools? And 98% of all marketers that we surveyed said they are already personally using AI in some way. So out of the several options they could pick, it was actually interesting to see the breakdown. 45% or so said they were experimenting, and 29% said fully it was infused into their daily workflow. So almost a third were saying it's already infused into their daily workflows. About 6% or so said they couldn't live without it, and 18% said they use AI periodically. So that's where that 98% number comes from. 2% said they don't use AI at all.
And this is a new question. We didn't ask this one last year, honestly, because there was no point in asking it last year. I think the biggest shift, obviously, that we've all seen is generative AI emerged. So last spring, you had image generation tools emerge. In the fall, you had obviously ChatGPT and language generation AI writing tools emerge, to the point where, I think what was the number? ChatGPT had 100 million users in January of 2023. So this was a really interesting one to us because we hadn't benchmarked it previously. I would put myself personally in the experimenting phase. I haven't changed any of my daily workflows as a CEO of a company based on it, but I use it all the time in a lot of different ways. But in a lot of, for me, it's additive. Like there's nothing I'm using yet that's driving like efficiency for me necessarily. It's like I'm doing things I couldn't do before. So like an 80-page research report that I can put into Claude and have it summarized for me. I just couldn't do that before. So, I think we're going to see this shift dramatically next year too. Do I would assume infused into my daily workflow is going to be probably the highest number.
Yeah.
And I think the couldn't live without it is going to easily be into the 20+% by next year. So this is one I'm like already anxious to see the data on in 2024, because I think this one's going to shift dramatically.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It'll be interesting too to track how it's going to benchmark against that tasks being intelligently automated today stat. So interestingly as well, there is significant AI optimism among the marketers that we talked to. So that, we wanted to get a sense, and this is a new question as well, of how people are feeling about artificial intelligence, given all of the different types of news items out there. There's some doom and gloom, some worries about risks and fears of AI. So we asked, how do you feel personally about AI and the impact it's having on marketing, business, and society? And actually 64% of marketers said that they had positive feelings about AI's impact on these three areas. Now, it should be noted that only 5% said they had negative feelings, though there is certainly a lot of neutral or not sure territory here. So about 14% said they were neutral, and 17% said, I'm not sure how I feel about it.
Yeah, I was actually surprised by this, given how much negativity there's been in the news the last few months. I mean, in our podcast every week, I feel like we have to make an effort to not be negative sometimes because it's just weird with the copyright law and jobs and threat of, existential threat to humanity. And like, there's all these negative headlines. So I was actually really pleasantly surprised to see the amount of positive sentiment towards AI. And I hope that that continues.
Yeah, absolutely. I was also pleasantly surprised. So when it comes to actually evaluating and purchasing AI technology, confidence here is actually slowly improving. So we've asked this question in the past, and how would you rank your confidence evaluating AI-powered marketing technology? So these numbers still aren't high. I mean, 69% say they're still at a medium, low, or none confidence level. So there's not a ton of high and very high answers here. However, the percentage of respondents here who said they have low confidence in evaluating and purchasing AI has decreased from 29% of all respondents in 2022 to 21% today. So there's a decent chunk of decrease in the number of people with low confidence year over year. The percentage of those who are expressing medium confidence has also gone up by about 7 percentage points, from 39% to 46% today. And the percentage of those with high or very high confidence improved very slightly from 29% last year to 32% this year. So we're definitely seeing that number slowly inch up, Paul, it looks like.
Yeah, heading in the right direction, but as we'll learn later on, education is just continues to be critical. There's like a democratized sort of approach to tools where a lot of employees have access to just go get individual tools for individual tasks, and tech stacks are getting complicated because you can add dozens of these tools. And yet a lot of the people that are able to make those decisions, and even up to the C-suite who pull the budget strings, there isn't a lot of confidence still that they actually really understand the technology they're buying. Part of that is on the vendor ecosystem. So many of these companies are young, like year old or less. They don't have onboarding nailed down yet. They don't have customer support teams in place. They don't have partner ecosystems that are built up to support the customers. So it's a very dynamic space right now. But it is, again, we saw some improvement in this area. And I think a further commitment to education and training in AI will shift this in the years to come.
To that point, kind of most marketers are still, by our count, in the early stages of understanding and adopting AI. So we asked a couple of questions here around this understanding and adoption. The first was, how would you classify your understanding of AI terminology and capabilities? And then we also asked, what stage of AI transformation best describes your marketing team? And what we found is that 58% of marketers, when we asked them about what stage of transformation they were at, so they could say understanding, piloting, or scaling, they were still in that understanding phase where they're still learning how AI works and exploring its applications and its potential value. Now, 35% said they're actually starting to prioritize and run AI pilot projects, and just 7% say they're actually scaling AI today. Now, interestingly, also, when we look at understanding, beginner understanding is about 35% of respondents, and intermediates about 54% of respondents. But that is quite different than 2022. In 2022, 45% of marketers said they were beginners, and only 43% said they were intermediate. So I'm seeing kind of, at least among this audience, a decently clear shift going from that beginner to intermediate level knowledge over the last 12 months.
Yeah, I mean, I think this jives with what we're seeing, qualitatively in the market, the conversations we're having. We talk to a lot of very large enterprises. We certainly talk to a lot of smaller businesses. My general take right now is the smaller businesses can just be more nimble. They have less restrictions, less barriers to work with this technology. And so they can go get a bunch of tools and test them without having to go through, approvals internally or getting through legal or security or anything like that. What we're seeing in a lot of large enterprises is movement to build AI councils and movement to build support for these initiatives, and then some isolated pilot projects that they can get through without big barriers. So like an AI writing tool, for example. spinning up a demo or spinning up a team, a small part of a larger team that's working with an AI writing tool. And so we're seeing a much more methodical approach, which is logical within bigger enterprises. So I could see there where that understanding is a very common thing we see at the big company level. They're starting to infuse AI education into what they're doing, starting to expand these AI councils. So nothing here surprised me. Again, I kind of expected we would see a movement from beginner to intermediate. I could see piloting being bigger. Like I guess I could have probably seen that being much larger. I do think we'll shift that, significantly next year. And I think this is the first year we made them pick one, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
So
yes.
in the stage of transformation in past years, you could say we're at understanding and piloting.
Right.
This year, we wanted to isolate that and have a pick the stage that best represented. So we can't compare it apples to apples to past years. But yeah, I don't think this is, I feel this is very representative of what we're seeing in the market across a wide spectrum of companies.
So unfortunately, we shared some positives about sentiment around AI adoption, how many people are using it. But unfortunately, we're finding that companies are lagging a bit behind when it comes to providing AI education and guidance. So we ask a couple questions about this every single year. The first of which is, does your organization offer any AI-focused education and or training for the marketing team? At the same time, we also ask which of the following do you consider barriers to the adoption of AI in your marketing? And we give a range of options you can choose. Now, first up, 78% of all the respondents say that their employers have no internal AI-focused education or training. So this actually is not that much changed from previous years when the vast majority of organizations did not provide this type of training. So we get to that 78% where 54% straight up said, no, we don't have any. 24% said it's in development, but don't have it yet. There's also some people that aren't sure they have it. So they're at least not using it if they do have it. Just 17% said their employers offer kind of formal AI-focused education and training. Now, Paul, I know this is one that jumps out that we had really hoped would start changing.
Yeah. I think it is. I mean, we've definitely started to see it. There's more in development than past years. This is one that we are seeing definitely in the data at the Institute. So we have that piloting AI for marketers on demand series, like the 17 courses. We've been seeing a lot of team licenses for that. So companies that are buying like 30 or 50 at a time and then infusing that into their internal training programs. We've done, I don't know, between you and I, Mike, like probably 15 custom intro to AI sessions for large enterprises where they'll have their whole team. So that intro to AI class we teach for free every few weeks. We're having organizations do that for free, and they'll have 600 marketers on the call from their company. So I would say in the last 3 to 4 months, we have seen a very noticeable uptake in organizations looking to go bring in AI education, whether it's through some internal initiatives, some external. But I would say this is one we're going to start to see a really significant shift because now the urgency is there for every organization to solve for this. And I would say the last few months has largely been spent figuring out, how do we do this? Do we build our own training? Do we go get some Coursera stuff? Do we, go get like Institute stuff? And so we're having lots more conversations with big enterprises in particular about how to build out their education programs. So I'm optimistic that this one's going to improve.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not going to be surprising then, given that when we asked about all those barriers in that separate question, gave people, choose multiple responses of what are your barriers to adoption of AI, that lack of education and training is right up there. Yeah. It is the top reason. It's been the top reason the past couple of years, but it is followed pretty closely by a few others, rounding out the top 5 barriers to adoption of AI. Lack of awareness or understanding is a big one. Lack of strategy. Lack of talent with the right skill sets. And significantly, there is still fear and mistrust of AI. Did anything jump out to you here, Paul, in terms of these top 5?
I mean, I've always just loved this question because this to me was getting to the root of what was stopping people from caring about AI. I mean, we started the Institute in 2016. I've been preaching this stuff. And I always just like, what are people waiting for? And so I've always watched this question with great interest. The fear and mistrust one jumps out a little bit this year because in previous years, those were split up into two options. We had a fear and we had a mistrust. And I think they were 16% and 17% individually last year. And it's almost like those got combined and mashed up to 36%. So I would say that has definitely become like risen more to the top, and we hear that one all the time. What I would say with this one, though, is it's really critical that you look at this chart, and when you download the report, think about this individually for your company. Forget the percentages here. Which of these are the barriers to you, to advancing AI in your organization, whatever level you're at? And really think about these. And hopefully there's some on this list that maybe you hadn't even considered before that could be barriers you're going to run into. And just know we're all dealing with these barriers at different levels, different size companies, different industries have different barriers they have to deal with. So I always think that this question is just a great question because it really sets the stage for people, the kinds of things they're going to have to solve for to drive adoption in their company.
So it may not surprise anyone on this call who is lacking some of the training and education at their company. I've also seen some comments predicting this finding right here. Someone said, I bet the number is pretty low of the companies providing generative AI and ethics policies. And you would be correct. You win the prize for predicting this finding, because when asked about if they have generative AI policies in one question and in a separate one, do you have any type of responsible AI principles or AI ethics policy? 22% only have generative AI policies, and only 21% have some sort of AI ethics policy. We actually broke this data down a little further by company size. Smaller companies are like 0 to 10 million in revenue are the most likely to lack these policies, but nobody, Paul, comes out of this looking good, it sounds like.
Yeah, I saw John said 21, surprisingly high.
Yeah.
I kind of thought the same thing, John. I kind of expected a little less even. This to me is like we didn't have this question last year. This is the one we all have to focus on together as an industry. Like this needs to be flipped next year. We really need 70+% generative AI policies, 70+% responsible AI principles for us to get this right as an industry. This is one, and to me, this is the one like you can do this next week. There are templates out there for this. Like you can start this process now. This is not a 3-month process. Jasper just put out an ethics template. We have our responsible AI template. There's great examples of generative AI policies out there. Like if you take one action item out of this, like go do this with your team, because this is the thing, especially in big enterprises. If you don't have a generative AI policy, your employees have no idea what they're allowed to do. You may have people using ChatGPT, whether you want them to or not. Maybe they're not trained on how to use it and they're putting proprietary confidential data into these systems as prompts. Like we have to get a hold of this now as an industry, and we can fix this one real fast. And so this would be, again, one of my kind of calls to action for this is let's flip this number in 2024.
So this kind of lack of company support, not having enough education and training, lacking some of these policies, despite the optimism among marketers, this still might, it looks like, be creating some fear or some uncertainty around AI amongst these respondents. So we mentioned that, even though it was number 5 out of 5, fear was one of the major barriers that people cited. And we actually asked about what do respondents believe will be the net effect of AI on marketing jobs in the next 3 years? And the most, 40%, said that they believe more jobs will be eliminated over time due to AI. It's very, very close, though. 36% said more jobs would be created over that 3-year time period than would be eliminated by artificial intelligence. Now, interestingly, those with the role of CEO or president are more likely than any other role to think that more jobs would be eliminated due to AI in the next 3 years. About 47% of that role gave that answer. Paul, what do you make of this?
Yeah, anyone who listens to the podcast knows this is a topic that I personally think a lot about and have some opinions on. I hope that the data here is correct, that the jobs, will be created. There's a good sentiment towards them being created, more of them. I'm just not sure right now. And I think this is one that I put this on Sunday on LinkedIn. It kind of blew up. I think it's almost 200,000 impressions. This whole idea of like AI, could eliminate a lot more jobs than we're preparing for. And my whole take on this is we have to just have this dialogue out in the open. Like, it could create more jobs, and I hope it does in the next 2 to 3 years. But there's just as good, if not a better chance that it eliminates some jobs in the next few years, maybe millions of jobs. And I don't know, and neither do the best economists in the world. But I think we owe it to our companies and our employees that we at least plan for that, and we start preparing for it. We're proactive and taking a human-centered approach to where the reduction of staff is the last option. So when we go in to use AI and we want to reduce time spent on repetitive tasks, we're redistributing that time to other areas and other roles and other projects that weren't getting done. And so that's the whole idea of a human-centered approach is, yes, we're going to take advantage of the technology. We are not going to use it to just cut costs and cut employees. And again, I think that's something that isn't going to happen from us just talking about, or other economists like that are out there doing their thing. This is going to happen at an individual company level. Choices are going to have to be made about how you're going to approach this. And it's why responsible AI principles are so essential. This is where you define that we are going to take this human-centered approach, and we are not doing this to reduce jobs and just cut costs. We are doing it to drive innovation and creativity and create a more fulfilling career path for people. Like, obviously I have some strong feelings about this, but I think this is one that we need to be talking about more as an industry.
Absolutely. So when we looked at actually entry-level roles, so when we asked, what is your role? What kind of tier are you in? Entry level is a response. And it seemed like people might actually be particularly lagging behind at the entry level when it comes to AI. Now, full disclosure, that's a pretty small cohort for the overall respondents. This is not everybody. But when you do look at entry-level roles alone, they're the most likely to say they're beginners when it comes to understanding AI. They're far more likely than other seniority levels to not use AI at all. And they actually were the most likely to say that AI will have no meaningful impact on jobs at all. Now, again, I would understand this is a very small sample size, but I did find this interesting, Paul, in the sense that I wonder if this is a downstream effect of that lack of guidance in education. Like, you and I, more advanced in our careers, can actually, we can kind of pick up some of this stuff and run with it on our own. I wonder if the lack of guidance here is hurting this cohort.
That was my exact impression. How do they know? Like, there's no education, there's no training. They don't have a clue about what's going on with it.
Yeah.
They're using the tools, but they don't know, like, perception-wise, what does this mean to business? And they've never been through downturns. They haven't been through major shifts in technology. They haven't seen the mobile revolution. They haven't seen the internet emergence. Like, a lot of us have been through some stuff, and you kind of get a sense for how this goes. So yeah, I think it's just a nature of the time and kind of their exposure they've had to this, like, education and training about AI.
So here's where we kind of get into pulling all these threads together and being like, okay, so what's going on here? What's the way forward? And really, it comes down to ownership. And we asked about who in your organization owns the adoption of and integration of AI technology for marketing. You could choose multiple roles. CEOs and CMOs, far and away, are the ones who are the owners of AI in marketing. Now, 35% of respondents said that CEOs, again, remember, multiple responses could be selected here, said that CEOs owned AI, either partially or fully. 33% said that CMOs own it. Now, interestingly, no other title here that were options even comes close. So 21% said nobody owns this. Chief Technology Officer is maybe the next most likely title here, with full or partial ownership, 15%. Other C-suite roles are around 10%. The IT department, 8% of the time, is involved. Interestingly, too, Paul, the larger the organization, the more likely AI ownership was to just fall on the CMO. So shifting from the CEO having partial or full ownership over AI to the CMO taking a much bigger role here. So CMOs clearly appear to be part of the picture here when it comes to who owns AI and who is going to be driving AI transformation in these organizations.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. Like you said, when we break it down by the small business versus the large enterprise, the CEO plays a much greater role in the small to mid-sized business. The CMO's, largely doing it in the large enterprise. I think the one data point we'll watch in future years is the no one owns it and not sure. 28% is not an insignificant amount of this.
Yeah.
Who basically, like, we don't know, like, we're blind here and like what's going to happen. So when you look at adoption, the impact on jobs, to think that 28% of companies have no idea who's in charge of this is actually kind of a scary thing, and could explain why there's no education and training, like no one's owning it. So yeah, just a data point to watch. This is, again, a variation of a question we previously asked. We don't have apples to apples data on this one. So this will serve as the benchmark into next year.
So kind of the big takeaway that we're seeing here is, given everything we've just gone through, CMOs really in particular have this opportunity and need to make AI understanding, training, and strategy urgent priorities. Now, keep in mind, as one of the main owners of AI within the organization, we actually found, when benchmarked against the other C-suite roles, CMOs actually fell behind when it came to AI understanding, confidence, and usage. They were the most likely to say they have a beginner's understanding of AI. They were least likely to say they have an advanced understanding. They were least likely to have high or very high degrees of confidence, again, compared to the rest of the C-suite. And they were least likely to be infusing AI into their daily workflows. So really what we're seeing here is that if organizations expect to kind of survive and thrive in this age of AI, CMOs probably need to be taking more urgent action to upskill themselves and their teams on AI understanding, usage, and training. And Paul, we had kind of come up with these 5 essential steps to doing that I think are important to share. Again, just as a first next step here for any marketing leaders, any business leaders who are watching this, on what do we do about this?
Yeah, and I think we've touched on these at a couple different times. I had this in my opening keynote for Maycon this year. I think we've talked about these steps on the podcast, but this is kind of the blueprint we give people. It's like, well, what do we do? It's a pretty simplistic approach, but it's like education and training is essential. None of it matters if no one on the team understands this stuff. So you have to start with a plan around this. And if you're not the person who does that, you need to raise your hand and say, I'd like to help. Like who can we talk to that can get education and training rolling in this organization? The AI Council we've seen being very successful, but like very impactful early on. A lot of organizations are scaling up a council real fast, and it can be kind of informal to start, but it can emerge into like a regular meeting, regular team that's cross-functional. So the AI Council is a great thing. At Maycon, we had Jessica Ria from VMware that told the story of the building of theirs from 2 people in February to 30 plus people now. So we're seeing those being built. We talked about the principles and policies being essential. I think leadership needs to take a proactive approach to assessing their teams and the key roles on teams, and saying, what does their job look like a year from now, 2 years from now? Kind of that impact of AI assessment. How much is going to be AI assisted? And then really building a roadmap that prioritizes kind of quick win use cases, those pilot projects, and then the longer term approach to like really strategic AI initiatives that solve problems or achieve goals in entirely new ways. So yeah, again, when you take all this data, the key is, what does it mean and what do we do about it? And I think it confirms for a lot of us what we were probably assuming about what's going on, except it just gives us a little more detail now. And I think these 5 steps become even more important when you start to look at what's going on across the industry.
I couldn't agree more. And I do want to emphasize, if you want to get the report before the email goes out, you can go to stateofmarketingai.com and download it there. Like I said, we will be sending out an ungated version tomorrow to the entire audience. So you will also get the report through that. This is just scratching the surface of what we talked about. This report has tons more analysis. It has more comparisons to 2022 and even more information and data in the report itself. So even if you watch today, I would highly encourage you to read the report. Now, we're going to dive in very quickly to our Q&A section. We'll bring Emily back on. We've got, 10 or so minutes left, and we're going to buzz through a few of these questions here. And I'm going to stop sharing so we can all come back on camera. All right.
Hey, Emily.
Hello, great to be here.
Emily, welcome back.
I see a lot of questions, Mike.
Yes, we have a ton of questions. I'm going to kind of throw some of these at you quite quickly because I do want to get through a significant amount of them. But Emily, I do want to start with you. Why do you think CMOs are emerging as the owners of AI within organizations instead of, say, more technical C-suite leaders?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would say I completely agreed with the conversation that you and Paul were having. I think these findings in the report were super interesting and unsurprising as a fellow marketing leader with a natural bias on how important and strategic the marketing function is. But I also think this, perhaps more than any other stat in the report, validates the tremendous opportunity that there is for marketers to embrace AI. And we also know from the report that marketers are those early adopters. We know that CMOs have to be the experts on who their potential and current customers are. And there's huge opportunity for AI to lean in and help here. We know that humans are really businesses' most valuable resource. And we, at least at Drift, believe that AI can preserve and extend that resource by automating about 80% of those digital customer experiences. But we equally believe in keeping humans in the loop, and that artificial intelligence and human ingenuity are going to work better together. And so even in that 20% where humans should or could step in, AI can help supercharge those conversations by surfacing those insights about buyer intent and behavior and predict and recommend those best next actions.
So I'm kind of interested in throwing this one question out to both of you. Paul, we'll start with you, but John says there's a lot of hype in AI, and as we all here know, some of it has failed to deliver. I mean, that sometimes happens more often than not. How are you thinking about gauging when a particular tool or technology is, quote, good enough to incorporate into a task workflow or your larger organization?
I mean, Emily, I'll let you go first, just because you see it with Drift and the integration. And again, you all have been doing AI for 5+ years. So, how you identify that might be interesting, that I can add a little context.
Yeah, I would say I'm stealing Scott's line a little bit here, but we talk about a lot that you just need to start. We have so many emerging technologies that are showing up every day. And like you said earlier, Paul, just jumping in and starting somewhere and trying something and being in it to win it. And so I think that when it's right to integrate is going to be different depending on the technology, the size of your company, and the specific business problem that you're trying to address. And so we always recommend to our customers and just, fellow marketers that we're interacting with, that you start with a specific use case, start small, and grow and build from there.
Yeah, and I think, Mike, it jives with what you and I always teach with the piloting stuff. Is pilot projects should be like 90-day sprints. Like, get a tech, do a great demo, make sure your team is properly trained and onboarded. If you can, again, like at big enterprise solutions, you're not going to just probably test for 3 months, but for the most part, you're going to be able to run a bunch of pilot projects, have a 90-day sprint where you evaluate it. Does it get us improvement? Is the target efficiency? Is it increasing productivity and output? Like, what is the goal you're hoping for it? Make sure the team knows how to use the tech, because too often we buy tech because it looks awesome, and then no one actually is trained on how to use it. And 90 days up, is like, we didn't get any value. But I just say, have a goal, have a value statement you want out of the tech, test it thoroughly for 90 days. If it works, integrate it. If it doesn't, get rid of it.
That's really interesting. I'm kind of curious about this one question. We talked about, that's one step. We talked about 5 essential steps. And at the end here, and when we were talking about that, Paul, you talked about doing an impact exposure assessment on your organization of some of these tools. And one of our audience members was curious about, could you maybe talk a little bit more about what that entails?
So this is something we did at the Institute, and it's something we've been advising clients on. And basically the premise here is, we went to hire 2 people at the Institute. So we just made 2 new hires. So we took the job description, it has all your bullet points of what this person can be responsible for. And we basically future-proofed it, looked at it and said, okay, 12 months, 18 months from now, based on our best knowledge of what the tech is capable of doing today and what we think it's going to be capable of doing tomorrow, AI tech in general, will this person still do these same things? Will we need a full-time human doing these things? And so if you look at it and say, okay, this is a 150-hour a month job of the work they're going to do, is these same tasks 100 hours a month a year from now? Is it 120? And so we're basically trying to project out, what do roles look like a year, 2 years from now? And so if you do that proactively, if you're at a big organization and you have dozens or hundreds of marketers, you have a responsibility to them to do this kind of exercise, because you could look at the role of designers, writers, coders, whatever those roles are, and say, okay, let's just look broadly at that role and say, how is that role evolving? And what do we think that looks like? And if you can look at, say, a team of writers and say, well, we could probably produce the same level of output with a third less writers a year from now. Okay, then we have a year to figure out what to do with those people, how to redistribute their time, how to put them on new projects, how to upskill them to other tasks, how to create new roles for them. That's the idea of the impact assessments. Let's be proactive about this and not get to the day where all of a sudden we're saving 50% on content creation and realizing we don't need the people anymore.
So we've talked quite a bit about, time and productivity savings enabled by AI. But Emily, I wanted to ask you this: do you have any examples of kind of use cases where organizations are using AI specifically more to drive like ROI generation versus just saving time?
Yeah, I think this is a great question because I would agree that a lot of the messaging and hype around GPT has been in the time savings and productivity bucket. And while that's absolutely true, GPT is really just one component of AI. It's apples to fruit. And so we can speak through it through the lens of experience that we've had, with our 5,000 global customers for the past 5 years with Drift. And that has been more focused on ROI. We really inherently believe that brand experiences, how your customers, how your buyers are interacting with you, and the website being that front storefront in the digital experience world is going to impact and result in those business outcomes. And so through conversational AI, adding the layer of productivity through GPT, as Scott answered in an earlier question, bringing the power of those two together to really understand your buyer and deliver hyper personalized experiences to them. That's where we see the ROI and output for our customers in terms of revenue, meetings booked, service applications, so on and so forth. So across the entire go-to-market lifecycle, from sales to marketing to service, seeing those results and really impacting both their tops and bottom line by being able to deliver those personalized experiences and really transform what that B2B buyer experience looks like.
That's fantastic. That's a really, really good in-depth example. I love it. We've only got 2 minutes or so left here, and we had a ton of questions. Sorry, we can't get to all of them, but we're definitely trying to get to as many as possible. I wanted to end on one that I think is probably top of everyone's mind as they leave this webinar. What advice would you personally give to other marketing leaders who are trying to embrace AI in their organizations? Emily, I'll start with you, and then Paul, you can kind of take us out here.
Sure. I would say 3 different things. One is simple, but lead by example. I think your marketing teams have to see you as a marketing leader, use it and embrace it, and being able to regularly communicate that in your staff meetings and your leadership meetings. And also going back to, what we talked about earlier of how AI is going to change everything, we have the opportunity now as leaders to completely rethink the way that our teams work. It's not a question of what jobs will AI take, but of how AI is going to completely transform how we work and how we're going to interact with each other in the same way that the internet did. And so this will not just be a defining time for companies, but also for careers. And so being able to paint that picture for your employees and for your teams is going to be important. And then I would end on just a third point that, create responsibility and opportunity for your teams, marketers, to jump in and solve those big business challenges. I can share a more tactical example here that folks on this call can steal, but just this week, our Drift marketing team, we hosted an internal AI hackathon where we brought our marketing organization together. We spent some time as leaders walking the team through, and other members of the team at all levels of the department, to share examples of what's worked for them, painting the art of the possible with different use cases on how we've used AI within our own organization. And then we presented the team with 4 different business challenges, not just marketing challenges, but the top priorities for the company. And then we organized teams around those 4 challenges and spent about an hour brainstorming and then hacking through different AI tools to bring the best ideas and solutions back to the group. And so now it's our team as marketing leadership and leadership across Drift to take those best ideas and put those into action.
That's awesome. Paul, got any advice for the marketing leaders out here trying to adopt and champion AI?
It's overwhelming. I mean, I get it. Like, we all have full-time jobs. It's a lot to process. And I would just say everybody's in the same boat. Everyone's overwhelmed. A lot of people are uncertain about what this means. And I would say get through the fear and uncertainty and take a leadership role in this. And you're going to create amazing opportunities for yourself and your company. So that's my big thing, is just default to action and get through the uncertainty. I get it, but I think there's way more opportunity here for the people that take that action. So I'll just say thank you. Thank you to everyone who took the survey, all 900 plus of you. We greatly appreciate your time and insights. Everyone who joined us today, again, we had over 1,500 people registered for day. To Emily and Scott and Drift for their ongoing partnership, and Mike, certainly to you and Kathy for all your work pulling us all together. So thank you, everyone. We really appreciate it. We'll be in touch with all the follow-up information from the webinar.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks
Yeah,
all.
all right.